Hello again and welcome to another edition of Meet the Press Reports. I'm Chuck Todd. So is the government hiding what it knows about UFOs? From the moment the first person thought they saw a flying saucer, Americans have been fascinated with so-called UFOs. Most sightings are easily explained, and Hollywood doesn't help. Early days sci-fi movies often depicted space aliens as human-like little green men who curiously spoke perfect English. But what happens when some 300 people claim to have seen the same thing? Or when U.S. military pilots record flying objects that seem to perform feats beyond human capacity? Former military officials believe the government truly is holding something back from the public. So we asked NBC News correspondent Sam Brock to look into what are now called UAPs, or somewhat awkwardly unidentified aerial phenomena. Sam, I know this is kind of a fun piece, but it's kind of serious too.
No doubt, because now there's just so much more visuals that we can sort of hang our hat on, Chuck. And you're right about the fact that UAPs does not exactly roll right off of the tongue, but rest assured, they are on the minds of many Americans. So much so that there have been congressional hearings to talk about them, testimonies from military members describing them, even a federal department now tasked with investigating them. So what have we learned so far? Not as much as we would like, but some scientists say with a little bit more information, we are hot on the trail of a breakthrough.
The traffic is approaching head on. Trying to choose the time of traffic. Right. And right by us right now.
For years, America's fascination and fixation
This is nuts.
with possible life outside of our world came through the lens of theater like War of the Worlds.
What men first thought were meteors or the often ridiculed flying saucers are in reality the flaming vanguard of the invasion from Mars.
A fervor in the 50s and 60s that generated fear over flying saucers.
Are the flying saucers real? What are they? Where do they come from?
Alien figures with arms, legs, and laser beams. But more than a half-century later, that fervor is back. This time fueled in part by some modern-day videos that seemingly defy explanation. Like this 2004 sighting captured by a Navy jet off the coast of San Diego, where a mysterious oblong object first appears to break lock on an infrared sensor, almost instantaneously accelerates and vanishes from sight. Or this 2015 encounter from a jet off the coast of Florida.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
The aircraft gently rotating in hurricane-force winds.
Look at that thing.
But these clips are hardly the creations of a sci-fi studio. They're unedited footage released from the federal government. With recent congressional hearings spotlighting how serious the issue has become.
As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine.
Former F-18 pilot Ryan Graves, with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, refers to UAP, or unidentified aerial phenomena, which he warned lawmakers represent a national security risk.
In your testimony to Congress, you described having your squadron for years seeing a series of complex maneuvers that were hard to explain. How common was this, and what were they seeing?
We upgraded our radar systems, and when we flew with the new radars, we started seeing objects on our radar displays that we weren't seeing just the flight prior with the older radar. As we upgraded all of our jets and all of our radars, we were seeing these on pretty much a daily basis.
Graves said the pilots would mostly fly in an area off the coast of Virginia Beach, and at times had to move or cancel flights based on the risks that these objects posed. Famously, Graves told members of the House Oversight Committee about a close encounter his squadron had in 2014.
Two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft.
Graves said he spoke to that lead pilot right after he canceled the flight.
He had a look of shock on his face, and this is someone that I'd been flying with for years at this point, almost on a daily basis, and he just went, I almost hit one of those damn things. And he didn't even have to describe it because we knew what he was talking about because it had been such an issue at this point.
Graves hasn't ruled out possible explanations like high-end technology or the work of foreign adversaries, but he says some aspects of the sightings cannot be explained. And through his new group, Americans for Safe Aerospace is calling for more robust channels to report UAPs and government transparency. This as scientists interested in these baffling developments, like Robert Powell, are weighing in.
How fast was that aircraft going in Texas?
It was traveling at a minimum of 1,900 miles an hour. But what's different about it is that it was hovering before it took off.
If Robert Powell, co-founder for the Scientific Coalition on UAP Studies, looks familiar, that's because you might have seen him recently in Steven Spielberg's Netflix docuseries Encounters.
I think whatever people saw was intelligently controlled, and it was not manufactured by the United States or any other nation for that matter.
Powell is a chemist and nanotechnology expert who's been studying UAPs for 17 years and zeroed in on an event in Stephenville, Texas in '08.
You don't have to believe in UFOs to believe residents in Stephenville, Texas saw something in the sky last week.
Which NBC News covered at the time, where some 300 people reported seeing a foreign aircraft with bright lights and bizarre movements.
I saw two red glows. They glowed, and then they kind of faded, glowed again.
Immediately shadowed by what appeared to be fighter jets, so Powell interviewed some of the witnesses and obtained FAA radar from that night using a Freedom of Information request.
What do we know about what the government initially said and then later said about the episode that night?
Well, initially the government said there were no F-16s in the air. However, I knew there were because I got the radar data from the FAA and I could track the F-16s.
While the military later acknowledged the presence of fighter jets, other details remain sparse. Powell used the data he collected to calculate the speed and coordinates of the spacecraft, or whatever was in the sky over central Texas, and arrived at some stunning conclusions.
The acceleration to go from standing still to 1,900 miles an hour in 10 seconds or less, depending on how you calculate it, is anywhere from 10 to 20 G-forces.
Powell says an F-16 moving in a straight line can't come close to that 10 to 20 G-force.
The only way we can do that is firing a missile.
There is no aircraft, human-made aircraft that you're aware of, that can accelerate at 10 G.
No. Not with a human being in it.
Powell says that type of otherworldly acceleration is not an isolated incident. Just look at the San Diego event almost 20 years ago, known as the Tic Tac event, based on the appearance of the aircraft, complete with first-hand testimony from one of the 4 pilots who witnessed it.
As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed."
Powell says a conservative estimate of that acceleration, based on the pilot testimony, was 256 G-forces, or a maximum speed of 28,000 miles per hour.
So this is the Tic Tac video. And so what you're looking at is an infrared video where white is hot on this video.
As we review the footage, Powell says something is missing, the radar that goes with it.
If there is technology that allows us to calculate speeds that are unlike anything humankind has seen before, why has it not been disclosed?
That's my question, is the government has to have that data, right? They didn't keep the videos and throw away the radar data. So they have to have that data.
Do you think they're withholding it because it might substantiate arguments that it's non-human technology?
You're asking me to read their mind, right? and I don't know. I mean, it could be they're withholding it for that, or they're withholding it for national security reasons.
As the search for evidence continues, however you define that word, renowned scientists like Dr. James Webb at Florida International University remain skeptical.
What about the anecdotal evidence when you hear hundreds of people reporting the same thing?
Well, then they saw the same thing, but it still doesn't tell me what that thing was.
They want something that so far has proven elusive. Concrete, immutable facts.
But you're a scientist, you're an astrophysicist.
Correct.
You're not taking anything for granted.
Have to be proven.
Do you feel like right now in this whole narrative over UAPs and non-human biologics, too much is being taken at face value?
I've been seeing this for, 60 years. I grew up in the 60s when this first all started. They were called UFOs then, still are now in many circles. And the same thing is being repeated now. But nothing has ever transpired, nothing has been proven. So until you prove to me it's extraterrestrial, I'm sorry, I can't accept it.
in lectures to both undergraduate and graduate level students.
I talked about some of the weirdest things I've seen. That image is weird.
Webb pushes the importance of the scientific method, a process defined by observing something, making a prediction, testing that prediction, and if you can't substantiate it, modifying your theories. He says it applies to his work with quasars, supermassive black holes that print and shoot out material at close to the speed of light, and also applies to unexplained sightings in the sky.
The camera can lie to you, as we all know. Until they prove what that really is, and it has to go through a lot of steps. You know exactly how far away it is, exactly how big it is. Tell me exactly how fast it's spinning. How do you know how fast it's spinning? How do you measure its velocity? That's what you need to know if you're a scientist.
So even if it's a guesstimate, even if, for example, a Navy commander tells Congress, I saw a tic-tac looking object, and in a split second it went 60 miles away, that is not quantifiable, in your opinion?
That's one amazing tic-tac. You can't just make a theory and say it's alien spacecraft and go with that. It's not science.
What do you think they're seeing then?
I don't know what they're seeing. I don't know they're aliens. I don't know whether they're aliens. I don't know whether they're other aircraft. I don't know whether they're swamp gas, clouds. Maybe their equipment's malfunctioning. I don't know what it is.
But Robert Powell says a military asset would pick up the transponder signals from any earthly aircraft, commercial or foreign. So when you start running through the other options, scientists and UAP science enthusiasts seem stuck.
What is the likely explanation of what that is?
I'd have no likely explanation for that is reasonable.
Neither does Ryan Graves, the former F-18 pilot, who, like Powell, focuses not just on the incredible capabilities of these aircraft, but what they seem to be capable of doing all at once.
Yes, we do have the technology to keep something stationary in the air, is a valid comment. We also have the technology to fly at 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, and we have technology to go over the speed of sound. I'm not aware of technology that allows us to do all three of those at whim in a single platform all day.
As for where we go from here, members of Congress, like Senator Chuck Schumer from New York and Mike Rounds of South Dakota, have introduced legislation to declassify government records related to UAP, with Schumer writing, "The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena." But with little by way of government secrets revealed so far.
The arrival of a space ship in Washington.
The onus may fall on advocates like Graves to move the ball forward.
Are you planning on holding Washington accountable when it comes to transparency and reporting back what they're finding?
We have to. We have to, because the American people are not going to just trust the conclusions of the government on this conversation. That doesn't mean that we have to spill the beans on our ways and means and our technology capabilities, but the government also doesn't have the right to classify reality.
And I guess that's the question, right? Which is, there's a lot of distrust of government. Government has not been transparent with us for 50 years about actual sightings. This is a recent phenomenon. Last 10 years, suddenly, whether it was Harry Reid, the late Harry Reid, a senator from Nevada, John Podesta, a former White House chief of staff, who sort of pushed the government bureaucracies to be more transparent. So how is government doing this?
Well, that's a great question. Look at what prompted this latest wave of interest. Back in 2017, there were leaked videos of these UAPs that were published.
Emphasis on the word leaked. Yeah. Leaked. This wasn't a voluntary thing by the government.
It was not. And all of a sudden, the public absorption, as you would imagine, was enormous. The New York Times is reporting that there was a shadowy program run by the Pentagon looking at these kinds of objects. And so now, fast forward to the last year or so, we've had congressional hearings, as we just covered, and just, this idea that there is an agency formed formally investigating anomalous objects. They are detecting, identifying, and attributing the objects around military installations, and the wording is very important, Chuck, as it relates to national security.
Are they going to share, though, this data with scientists, with astrophysicists, so that essentially they could road test this stuff a little bit? Because, again, going back to the idea of we're not going to trust a government conclusion on this.
And that's part of the problem, because so far they've created this department. What has been shared? We've seen a few videos.
Yeah.
We have not seen the radar that would help scientists to actually calculate how fast these objects are going. And we're seeing members of both parties in Congress, bipartisan efforts,
One of the
holding
few
press
things like
conferences.
this,
Right.
yeah.
This doesn't happen on
Yeah.
many subjects,
Yeah.
but people all over the political spectrum saying, you need to create more transparency and show us intelligence agencies, show us Pentagon, what information you actually have.
All right, full disclosure, you're journalists first. You know, we're just here, we report, we observe, all this stuff. You went in as a professional skeptic on this, so did I. Where are you now?
Look, we always have to maintain some level of skepticism, right? But I went into it thinking that I'm going to investigate this as thoroughly as I can. There's no way that it's true. And I came out of it trying to explain, how can an aircraft go at 250 plus G-force, 28,000 miles an hour, nothing that is really capable from Chinese or American or Russian technology? That just doesn't make any sense. So unless the universe functions in a way that we don't yet understand,
Right.
it seems like this is the most logical explanation, if there is an explanation.
And that's the part of this. It's sort of like we can't prove another theory yet. That's the problem.
We don't have it yet. Nope.
All right. Sam, I got a thing. Fun story, wasn't it?
Thank you.
Yeah. When we come back, has the government actually been hiding information on UFOs from the public, or just hiding what they don't know? Stay with us. Welcome back. After the congressional hearing in July, some lawmakers have called for the declassifying and release of government information about UFOs. But this push for more government transparency remains an uphill battle. So joining me now is Republican Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee. He's one of Capitol Hill's louder voices for increased government transparency around UFOs. And Garrett Graff. He's author of a brand new book, UFO, the inside story of the U.S. government's search for alien life here and out there. Welcome to both of you. Garrett, let me start with you. You spent a couple of years researching the government's history with UFOs, something the congressman's been trying to get the government to be more transparent about. So let me start with you. What is one thing you've learned about UFOs that the public doesn't know about?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that stand out for me right at the top here. The first, as you covered in some of the previous segment, that there is something real here. There are things out there in our airspace that we do not understand what they are, and that those could represent exquisite new adversary technology, but they could also represent science that we don't understand, atmospheric, meteorological, and astronomical science that we don't yet understand. And that I believe that the government is covering up some level of its knowledge and understanding about what some of those things are, both in terms of what chunk of that is our government's own secret development programs, planes, drones, new technologies that we're working on, as well as what we're sensing and detecting of advanced adversary technology being tested against U.S. forces or around U.S. airspace. What I'm unconvinced of is that the government is covering up meaningful knowledge of, alien spacecraft, alien visitors, extraterrestrial contact. I just don't see the extraordinary evidence or the fingers of the cover-up that one would expect if that was, in fact, the case.
What do you make of the newfound interest? It appears that government is being a tad more public. Is this an acknowledgement? Maybe they need the scientific community's help?
Yes, and I think part of the shame of this, and I think this is part of where the congressman agrees on as well, the government should be more interested in this than it has turned out to be over recent years. And I think part of what you have seen is this shift since 2017 that serious people are talking seriously about this in national security circles in Washington and on Capitol Hill. Congressman,
you've pushed this issue a little bit. Curious why? What got you started on this issue?
Transparency. Since 1947, they've told us these things don't exist, yet Harry Reid funded, very well funded, millions of dollars towards research of it. And they spend a whole heck of a lot of time, effort, and money on telling the American public they don't exist, but yet they're studying. Case in point, I proposed an amendment to the FAA reauthorization bill, and it basically just said if a commercial airline pilot were to spot some anomaly, or UFO as we used to call them, and they would issue a report to the FAA, which they would, but also that report would be made to Congress.
Sure.
Well, it was blocked. The whip told me that it was blocked, and I said, why was it blocked? He said the intelligence community blocked it. And I said, wait a minute, you mean the committee? And he said, no, the community.
What does that mean? Because look, I've been in Washington a long time, and probably too long, some people might say. But no. I would...
You're still a young man.
There's a part of me that says, well, this is just what the intel community... Even if they don't know something, they're afraid of admitting what they don't know. How much of this stonewall is that, do you think?
I think there's quite a bit of arrogance, but there's also a compartmentalization. You got to realize I'm from Knoxville. Oak Ridge National Lab backs up to my back door.
Right. You're well aware of national security issues.
I am. You figure during the atomic bomb, several thousand people worked there, yet maybe 12 knew about what they were actually working. I mean, husbands and wives didn't know. I've talked to several people in my campaigning, knocking on doors. Yeah. You know, they tell you that they didn't know that their wife was working on the fuse and they were working on an electrical component of the bomb. But you fast forward now. We have these committees. We had Intelligence Committee had their first open committee last year on this issue. And they brought in 2 people that were supposed to be overseeing it, I guess, for the Pentagon. Those guys couldn't even spell UFO. I mean, they had no knowledge, and it's just infuriating to me. We're spending billions of dollars. We give the Pentagon billions of dollars. They cannot account for 50% of their assets. And what do? We rewarded them with, I think, $20 or $40 billion new dollars this year.
Let me ask you this. You've said that this is a worldwide phenomenon, and we know there are multiple militaries. What would an international investigation look like on this? How could because it certainly would help the scientific community.
I think so, but I think the scientific community is kept out. And when they're brought in, it's just for dollars. Right now, because of people like yourself, and NBC and others in the national media are putting this out because they realize over 55% of the people believe there's something else out there. I have a T-shirt I sell on my website. More people believe in UFOs than believe in Congress. I mean, it's the truth, brother. You and I both know it, and that's why they don't come to Washington, because there's no intelligent life down here. But it's just, if it doesn't exist, then why do they keep spending the money to tell us? And is it Russia? I don't think so. They wouldn't be bogged down in Ukraine. If it's China, they'd own us even more. And if it's us, why have we had 14 documented near misses with $50 million aircraft and some of the best trained pilots in the world?
Garrett, have you uncovered, who are the world's leading experts at trying to provide some explanations to what folks are seeing?
Well, there are people who are working on exactly the question that you just started to touch on, which is, what would a serious hunt for UFOs and UAPs actually look like? And a big part of it, which you saw come up in this summer's congressional hearings as well, is the need to move away from human witnesses, who are just terrible witnesses, as anyone who
crime
any
scenes.
police officer
we know this about this.
Investigated
right.
a crime scene or a car accident knows, and move to something that's more sensor-based and instrument-based. And so along those lines, there's a project called the Galileo Project, which is led by the chair of the Harvard Astronomy Department, Avi Loeb, who has built this fall the first UAP observatory on the roof of the Harvard Astronomy Building in Cambridge, that is trying to better understand, what's up there on a daily basis. Because part of the challenge of identifying what's anomalous is understanding better what is normal. And we don't even have a particularly good baseline of understanding what's up in the sky on a normal basis, which you saw in this winter's Chinese spy balloon flap, where, it turns out if you set the NORAD radars slightly differently, we start turning up a lot of weather balloons that we panic and then send up the world's most advanced fighter to shoot down with a $250,000 missile, something that turns out to be a weather balloon from the Northern Illinois Balloon Brigade Meteorology Club.
Garrett, how come NASA doesn't find anything with satellites before it enters our atmosphere?
Well, so some of this is also, part of what is fascinating about the science of this is extraterrestrial craft could be passing all around us all of the time, and we don't have the technology adequate to notice that effectively any civilization that would have mastered interstellar travel would probably be moving at a fraction of the speed of light. we don't have effectively any technology that would notice something moving at the fraction of the speed of light through our own solar system that was smaller than a football field.
So, Congressman, let's play the logic game here. If there is an alien life that comes here, they're more advanced than we are.
Sure.
It's a scary proposition, right?
Travel light years.
You know, exactly. So, how should this be viewed? How should government prepare? And is this worth the money to prepare to deal with something like this?
I don't know about preparing. It's just being transparent. You know, the vastness of God's great universe. Every night I go out and look at the stars, and the light from those stars literally left there before the time of Christ.
Right.
And I mean, some of those stars don't even exist anymore. If we're dealing with some technology that can fly these light years at these incredible speeds, you know, if they wanted to do us in, they'd have already done it. And I just think we are trying to overprotect our public, and our public wants to know what's going on.
Are there more ways you can tie the hands of the Pentagon to be more transparent?
Yeah, if we had more people in Congress with some guts.
I feel like this bipartisan caucus is growing.
Yeah, my buddy Jared Moskowitz, he's there, and you know, it's Republican and Democrat. It's not a bipartisan situation. Not on this one. We know the Pentagon has got their hands in this, and we just want to. The American public needs to know.
Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee. Garrett Graff with his terrific new book. Garrett, man, you have some great selections in books that you write. This is a terrific topic as well. Thank you, sir. Congrats.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for this episode of Meet the Press Reports this week. Thanks for being here. Next week, Maine becomes the first state to partially decriminalize sex work. This is a hugely controversial idea, but it may not mean what you think it means. That's next time on Meet the Press Reports.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.